No science is more ancient than what? That's right, than astronomy. Astronomy is the oldest science, predating language, writing, and instruments. The stars have always been visible to humans, providing a daily spectacle that was accessible to everyone. However, today, light pollution in cities makes it challenging for most people to observe the stars. Modern astronomy requires heavy instruments and observatories in remote locations or orbit to obtain a clear view. Modern astronomy has enabled us to observe objects beyond our own galaxy. Unlike our ancestors who could only see the stars in our own galaxy, we can now detect alien star systems and their planets. Although these planets appear as faint shadows and blurry dots from light years away, we can still discern their existence. For example, there is a twinkling star located in the Hydra constellation that was ejected out of our galaxy by a black hole at an incredible speed of 2 million kilometers per hour. It's unfortunate that the ejected star lost its home. Despite being the fastest star, it doesn't have an exciting name like Bugatti or Peregrine Falcon, although some people may have referred to it that way. Another example is a triple star surrounded by a shining gas disk, which some people may be tempted to name after a biblical angel's throne. However, the star was officially named W Orionis, which is a rather unremarkable name. Similarly, even planets tend to have boring names. One can only imagine how fascinating it would be to name space objects with creative and fancy names, such as naming a giant egg-shaped diamond Faberge. Unfortunately, naming conventions for space objects have more to do with bureaucracy than imagination. There are more than 5,000 known exoplanets in our catalogs. And how many stars? More than 1 billion. So there just aren't enough beautiful and poetic names to go around. In the past, people gave the names of celestial objects more meaning than just using them as reference numbers. Different cultures and civilizations ascribe different meanings to the same group of stars. For example, the Greeks considered the W-shaped constellation Queen Cassiopeia, the Chinese the greatest chariot rider Huanglin, and the Vikings the horned squirrel climbing the world tree Yggdrasil. In short, people named celestial objects according to what was meaningful and significant to them. For example, the Greenlandic Inuit saw a seal skin filled with oil in the constellation, and the natives of the Marshall Islands saw a guinea pig tail. Each culture had its own unique way of interpreting the stars. The study of the names of stars and other celestial objects can provide valuable insights into human culture, beliefs, and mentality. But instead of talking about stars as giant glowing spheres of plasma, let's turn things around and let the cosmos talk about us. The night sky serves as a reflective mirror that shows us what is happening on Earth. By looking at the stars, we can better understand ourselves and the world in which we live. Do you know who first divided the sky into constellations? The first recorded division of the sky into constellations did not come from the Greeks or Egyptians, but rather from the civilization that gave birth to writing and civilization itself, Mesopotamia, an oasis between two rivers. The country was known by various names, including Sumer and Babylonia. By the 2nd millennium BC, Babylon had transformed from a small town into an empire, and its people began to question how they could discern the will of the gods to maintain their greatness. This prompted the Babylonians to develop a system for observing and interpreting the stars and constellations, which they believed provided clues to the gods' intentions. If you are a person who thinks that everything you have was created because of God, it is okay to think that way. And they thought so. People believed that their possessions and successes were a gift from God. It was common to see empire as a gift from the gods. Initially, people predicted the future by guessing at the entrails of animals, but soon they began to observe the stars to understand the divine message. The early practice of astronomy was closely related to religion. While most stars moved around one point, some stars deviated from this pattern and wandered unpredictably. These wandering stars were considered particularly significant and were interpreted as omens of great importance. It was believed that only the gods could afford such tricks in the heavens. Astronomers did not know that these were actually planets and viewed each one as a message from a particular god. Constellations were already grouped together by humans, including various rural objects such as the plow, as well as mythological figures such as the eagle and the dead man and the rabid dog with the head of a man. Some constellations even included good demons believed to ward off evil. However, there were also familiar constellations such as Leo, Scorpio, Gemini, Libra, and Sea Goat, which later became Capricorn. The circle of constellations, before which the sun passes in a year and the moon in a month when viewed from Earth, is known as the Zodiac, and it was invented in Mesopotamia. Interestingly, the oldest constellation ever invented by humans was also present on the same map, and it predates the construction of Babylon. Pause and test your intuition. What is the oldest constellation here? In ancient Babylon, they didn't care what sign of the zodiac you were born under. They observed which constellation the wandering gods were in right now. The priests saw it as a sign that foretold the future. Additionally, the Mesopotamians had superstitious beliefs, such as the idea that when Jupiter is positioned behind the moon, it signifies the death of the king. In such situations, people developed cunning rituals to outsmart the ill-fated prophecy. One example is the replacement of the king with a laborer or criminal who would be dressed in royal attire, provided with servants, and made to sit on the throne for 100 days. Furthermore, during the 100 days when the replacement king was on the throne, the actual king would be kept hidden inside the palace, away from public view. If the false ruler managed to survive the 100 days, he would then be poisoned to ensure that he did not attempt to retain the throne. Meanwhile, to the southwest of Mesopotamia, the Egyptians were also studying the stars, not for astrological purposes, but for practical reasons. Among the stars, the most crucial for the Egyptians was Sirius. The appearance of Sirius in the pre-dawn sky signaled to the Egyptians that the Nile River would soon overflow, resulting in the transformation of the arid land into a fertile valley. Thus, the Egyptians used the rising of Sirius to mark the beginning of their year. The remaining stars in the sky were divided into 36 equal parts. And when the constellations from each section first became visible above the horizon in a given year, the Egyptians would commence a new 10-day week, each of which was protected by a unique deity. The Egyptians developed a calendar consisting of 36 segments, each with 10 days and an additional 5 spare days, for a total of 365 days, very similar to our modern calendar. But why did they need 5 spare days? Interestingly, the Egyptians included 5 extra days so that they could give birth. In their mythology, the naked body of the goddess, Nut, represented the Milky Way. Every night, Nut would swallow the sun god, ready to give birth to him, give birth to him again the next morning, symbolizing the cycle of day and night. And where are the other 5 days, you ask? Indeed, according to Egyptian mythology, Nut used the additional 5 days to give birth to 5 days to give birth to 5 deities: Osiris, Nephthys, Seth, Is, and Horus, one per day. This ensured that everything fell into place perfectly. The Egyptians had a remarkable way of integrating their mythology with the workings of the heavens. They often depicted the stars as animals, not necessarily because they had a fascination with animals, but because they believed that the gods rewarded them with the appearance of animals. Yes, the Egyptians believed that the gods' heads should be those of animals that corresponded with their character and profession. For example, Sekhmet, the goddess of war, was represented with the head of a fierce lioness because of the association with bravery and combat. Similarly, Anubis, the god of burial, was depicted with the head of a jackal, because scavengers, where? They're always where death and burial are. It all makes so much sense when you're an ancient Egyptian. The astronomical ceiling in the tomb of Pharaoh Seti features various constellations, including the bull, lion, falcon, and a god with the head of a falcon. Additionally, it also depicts crocodiles and a pregnant hippopotamus with a crocodile on her back. She, by the way, represented Tart, the goddess of procreation, while her husband was symbolized by a crocodile. The two animals were seen as one, as they were believed to be responsible for the creation of new life. Although Tart is often depicted leaning on her husband, in some depictions she is shown leaning on the constellation of the bull's foot instead. Pretty original, by the way. The zodiac that is familiar to us today originated from the blending of different cultures and the addition of new constellations from Mesopotamia and Egypt that were introduced to Greece. The Greeks were receptive to foreign astronomy, but unlike the Sumerians and Egyptians, they believed that it was not the gods themselves and their star avatars who lived in the starry sky, but the people and objects that the gods placed there. In Greek mythology, the hero's journey to the stars was an important story, and ordinary people would lie under the open sky and listen to stories about heroes like Perseus, seeing the events in the starry sky. A real old-time projector, several constellations could be combined to create a single story. For example, the hero Perseus with the severed head of the Gorgon and the winged horse Pegasus, born from drops of Gorgon blood, could be seen side by side. Between them, chained to a rock, is Perseus's beloved Andromeda, whom her own parents wanted to give to the monster. There goes Cepheus and Cassiopeia. In addition to the constellations mentioned above, there was also a monster named the Whale, from whom Perseus rescued Andromeda. Everyone could watch the show, and a ticket to the amphitheater was not required. Indeed, while the names of the individual constellations' creators are lost to history, we do know who compiled them into a comprehensive system. That person was Claudius Ptolemy, a universal scientist and a Renaissance man of his time. Ptolemy cataloged 48 constellations. The constellations cataloged by Ptolemy can be divided into 3 categories. The first group represents heroes, such as the mighty Hercules or Serpentine, who had the power to heal the living and raise the dead. The second group consists of mythical objects, such as the lyre of Orpheus, which could make the realm of the dead weep, or the arrow of Hercules, which killed the eagle that pecked Prometheus's liver. The third group includes a variety of creatures, including the aforementioned eagle as well as many others. One example of a creature in the third group is the dragon, which guarded the golden apples and was also defeated by Hercules. Zeus, in typical fashion, turned into a swan to seduce yet another mortal beauty. If Zeus could have kept his impulses in check, the collection of myths may have been less vast. Out of the 48 constellations, there was one that did not fit into the general categorization and seemed to have stumped the Greeks in terms of imagination. The odd constellation that did not fit into the categorization of heroes, mythical objects, or creatures was the triangle. Throughout their mythology, the Greeks filled the sky with instructive myths featuring heroic figures and sinners alike. These stories were meant to remind future generations how to behave and how not to behave. The Greeks believed that their mythological stories had a powerful impact on people because the characters and events were visible in the stars. When you see these stories depicted in the sky, it becomes harder to doubt their existence. The Greeks held a belief that their heroes, who were the subject of many legends, were placed in the heavens after death. It was their imaginative thinking that gave rise to the constellations we still recognize today. According to ancient Greek beliefs, the sky was a solid sphere held up by the Titan on his shoulders. At the same time, some part of the heavenly dome was always under the earth. In the realm of the dead, the stars rose from under the earth every evening and were first washed down by a river called the ocean. That's it, and then they went up. It's beautiful. But the Greeks weren't always so naive. One day, all these mythological ancient Greek fairy tales stopped satisfying them. People are curious, aren't they? The ancient Greeks, in their quest for understanding, were among the first to attempt to explain the movement of celestial bodies through rational means, without attributing it to the actions of gods. Anaxagoras was among the first to suggest that stars were not simply characters on a celestial sphere, but were instead distant suns like our own. Similarly, Aristarchus of Samos proposed that the planets and Earth revolved around the sun, challenging the then accepted belief that the Earth was at the center of the universe. During the 5th century AD, the fall of ancient civilization occurred due to the attacks of barbarians, causing astronomy to become insignificant to people. Given the prevailing aggression, hatred, and destruction, it was not surprising that people did not prioritize the study of astronomy. However, in the Middle Ages, other nations took up the Greeks' knowledge, leading to the rise of Oriental astronomers. But what did they see in the sky? The Arab astronomers translated Ptolemy's star catalog into their language and renamed it Almagest. They distributed this book along the Great Silk Road to all countries. Furthermore, they improved the Greek astrolabe device to increase the accuracy of determining the star's coordinates. Huge observatories were built on the personal orders of rulers, such as those in Istanbul and Samarkand. Since there were no telescopes at that time, they used angle meters similar to curved rulers, called sextants, like the one with a radius of 40 meters in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. This sextant can still be viewed by visiting the area, whether for dates, Assassin's Creed settings, or scientific exploration. It's incorrect to assume that the Greeks were the only ones responsible for advancing science. The inhabitants of Asia, including Uzbekistan, also made significant contributions to astronomy's development. The astronomers of the East were the first to assign names to many individual stars. If a star's name begins with Al, it is likely to be Arabic, such as Aldebaran, Altair, and Alcor. 2/3 of the stars have historical names that originated in the East. Detailed tables recorded the positions of these stars on different days. By using these tables, it was possible to refine the calendar, predict the movement of celestial bodies, and determine the time and direction for prayer, which was especially important with the advent of Islam. That is, these arrows in hotels, which show the protected mosques, that is, where to pray, used to be found without a compass and GPS. For many Arabs, basic knowledge of astronomy was crucial for survival, since the desert had no landmarks on the ground to navigate by, making it similar to an ocean. Bedouin nomads possessed fundamental knowledge of astronomy, which allowed them to navigate by the stars without requiring astrolabes or compasses, relying solely on the starry sky above. To facilitate their recall of the stars' positions, they developed a mnemonic system. Rather than naming stars after heroes, the Arabs created legends based on ordinary people and placed them in the sky. One example is the story of a young girl named Juza, who was betrothed to a man named Suhey, residing in a distant land with his 2 sisters. According to legend, Juza passed away on his wedding night, and fearing blood feud, Sushi fled to the southern region. One of the sisters pursued her brother, crossing the river, while the other stayed behind and mourned him. This plot helped remember the relative positions of the navigational stars. For example, Huzzah's necklace is represented by Orion's belt, and Canopus symbolizes the bridegroom fleeing to distant lands. The sisters Procyon and Sirius, and the Milky Way serves as the river that separates them. In the vicinity, one can locate the bride's lost innocence, symbolized by a triangle with an orange star at its core. Unlike the Greeks, the Arabs found a fitting image for this triangle. One does not need to comprehend geometry to grasp its significance. However, the Bedouins faced a challenge with one star since they had no polar star indicating north. This predicament is not exclusive to other latitudes, but pertains to the fact that the Earth's axis constantly changes its tilt, completing its cycle in 26,000 years. Consequently, the axis around which the firmament rotates shifts, causing the nearest star to it, known as Polarissima, to change too. These stars were once at the center of the firmament, with the sky revolving around the star in the heel of Hercules 12,000 years ago, when the Ice Age ended, and the oldest stone temple of Göbekli Tepe was built. 4,500 years ago, the Egyptians aligned the edges of the pyramids, already gazing at another Polarissima Tuban in the constellation of the Dragon. During the first millennium AD, there was a void where the pole star should have been. Camel riders used the 2 stars that rotated closest to the invisible axis to locate the north. They were called 2 wild calves, but I like the other name, the Guardians of the Pole. And in the next issue, We will travel to the origin of the stars that led caravans of silk, spices, and knowledge. Lands where royal lives depended on the stars. Find out what the ancestors of most of our viewers, the Slavs, saw in the sky. And why does the big bear not look like a bear, but like a scoop? In the meantime, click on the bell and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next video.